Good morning, this is your daily briefing from the New York Times. Today's headlines for Tuesday, August 18, 2026. I'm your host, and we have a packed edition today, spanning geopolitics, climate crisis, trade tensions, and a host of domestic stories from politics to culture. Let's dive in. We begin with the top story. President Trump, facing a deepening quagmire over Iran's nuclear ambitions, is turning to a familiar face, North Korea's Kim Jong-un. 7 years ago, in his first term, Trump held 3 face-to-face meetings with Kim, declared they had a great relationship, and walked away empty-handed. North Korea not only kept its nuclear program but accelerated it. Now, as the administration grapples with Iran, the question looms, could the same pattern repeat? David Sanger and Anton Troyanovsky, veteran reporters on nuclear diplomacy, note that the earlier effort failed because Kim never committed to verifiable disarmament, and Trump's personal diplomacy couldn't bridge the gap. The Iran situation is arguably more complex, with regional allies like Israel and Saudi Arabia deeply invested, and the memory of the 2015 nuclear deal's collapse still fresh. The administration's outreach to Pyongyang may be an attempt to create leverage or a distraction, but the historical precedent is not encouraging. From nuclear tensions to a crisis of a different kind, the nation's largest reservoirs, Lakes Mead and Powell, have hit levels not seen since 1957. The Colorado River system, which provides water and electricity to millions across 7 southwestern states, Arizona, Nevada, California, and others, is in a state of crisis with no end in sight. Lake Powell, on the Utah-Arizona border, fell to a record low last Saturday, and Lake Mead, the larger downstream reservoir, dropped to its lowest recorded point a week earlier. Scott Dance and Mira Rojanisical report that the combined storage is at a historic nadir, threatening agricultural deliveries, hydropower generation, and municipal supplies for cities like Las Vegas, Phoenix, and Los Angeles. The Bureau of Reclamation has already imposed tiered shortages, but the long-term outlook hinges on snowpack in the Rockies, which has been dwindling for 2 decades due to climate change. Negotiations over post-2026 operating guidelines are ongoing, but the math is brutal. The river is over-allocated, and the climate is not cooperating. Meanwhile, up north, Canada is in a frantic scramble to avoid a new wave of U.S. tariffs set to take effect at midnight tonight. Prime Minister Mark Carney spoke with President Trump this afternoon, and a negotiated proposal was handed to the White House. Martina Stevens-Gridneff, reporting from Toronto, says the talks have been intense, with Canadian negotiators seeking to preserve the USMCA framework while addressing Trump's grievances over dairy, lumber, and automotive content. The cost of a deal could be steep. Canada may have to concede on supply management or accept quotas. But the alternative, tariffs on billions in exports, would inflict immediate pain on an economy already slowing. The midnight deadline adds a cliffhanger quality to a relationship that has seesawed between cooperation and confrontation. Turning to the Middle East, Jared Kushner, Trump's son-in-law and former senior advisor, met for hours with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in Jerusalem on Monday. The goal, break a logjam over the administration's plan for post-war Gaza. Netanyahu has refused to pull back Israeli forces until Hamas fully disarms, a condition Hamas has rejected. The ceasefire reached last October has been fraying, with Israeli operations continuing beyond agreed withdrawal lines. David Halbfinger and Adam Raskin report that Kushner's involvement signals the administration's urgency to show progress before the midterms, but the fundamental deadlock, Hamas's arms versus Israel's security demands, remains unresolved. The meeting also touched on the humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza, where aid delivery is still bottlenecked. In Ukraine, a technological shift is changing the battlefield. Ukrainian drone teams now have near real-time satellite intelligence on Russian troop movements and locations. Michael Schwartz and photographer Tyler Hicks embedded with a drone unit in the Zaporizhzhia region. They describe how commercial and government satellites feed targeting data directly to pilots dozens of miles away, allowing strikes on Russian positions almost as they happen. This sensor-to-shooter loop compresses the kill chain from hours to minutes, giving Ukraine a critical edge in a war where artillery and drone dominance decide territorial gains. The system relies on a mix of Western-provided imagery and Ukrainian analytical capacity, and it's evolving rapidly. In southern Africa, Zambia's President Hakainde Hichilema has won a second term with 60% of the vote after a tumultuous campaign. John Elligan and Rebecca Lungu report from Lusaka that Hichilema campaigned on revitalizing the copper-dependent economy, but his new term comes with a geopolitical complication. The Trump administration is pressing for greater access to Zambia's critical minerals, especially copper and cobalt, essential for the green energy transition. Zambia is also navigating debt restructuring and Chinese influence. Hichilema's victory gives him a mandate, but the balancing act between Western demands, Chinese investments, and domestic expectations will define his next 5 years. Now to domestic stories. In Texas, Muslim communities that have grown for decades, especially around Dallas, are confronting a rising tide of Islamophobia. David Goodman, Lauren McGoy, Jesus Jimenez, and Ruth Graham conducted over 45 interviews at mosques, businesses, and political events. They found a coordinated effort by conservative activists and some elected officials to restrict Islamic institutions, from zoning battles over mosques to campaigns against Sharia law in courts. One activist was quoted saying, "I won't rest until every Muslim is gone." The reporting traces how national rhetoric has filtered down to school boards and city councils, creating a climate of fear for a community that includes many immigrants, refugees, and multi-generation Texans. Hawaii is assessing damage from Hurricane Lala, which brushed the islands as a Category 1 storm. Christina Morales and Judson Jones report that while the ice stayed offshore, outer bands caused extensive power outages, submerged roads and bridges, flooded homes, and at least 3 deaths. The Big Island bore the brunt. Hurricanes rarely make landfall in Hawaii due to its small size in the vast Pacific, but near misses can still be devastating. Emergency crews are working to restore power and clear highways, and officials warned that the storm's remnants could bring more rain. In Maine, the family of Johann Sebastian Duran Guerrero, a 25-year-old Colombian immigrant, is pressing for answers after he was shot and killed by an immigration agent during a July 13 confrontation in Biddeford. Maya Spoto and Murray Carpenter report that the Department of Homeland Security's Inspector General is investigating, but neither DHS nor ICE has disclosed whether Duran Guerrero was the target of the operation or released body camera footage. The family's attorney says the lack of transparency compounds their grief. The case comes amid a broader crackdown on immigration enforcement that has seen increased raids and detentions. Politics now. In Florida, 3 Democratic Socialist candidates are testing the left's appeal in a state that has shifted sharply right. Trump won by 13 points in 2024. Patricia Motzi reports from Fort Lauderdale and Miramar that the candidates, running in House and Senate primaries today, argue that the Democratic Party's path back to relevance is embracing progressive policies, not moderation. But in South Florida's Latin American communities, socialism remains a potent pejorative tied to memories of leftist regimes. The primaries are a litmus test for whether a left-wing message can penetrate in hostile territory. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth made an unusual appearance at the Iowa State Fair on Monday, campaigning for vulnerable Republican Representative Zach Nunn. Bayless Wagner reports that Hegseth touted Nunn's military background and criticized previous Democratic administrations, saying, "We're restoring the warrior ethos inside our department because that matters." Previous defense secretaries have largely avoided overt partisan campaigning. Hegseth's presence marks a departure from that norm and underscores how critical Nunn's seat is to the GOP's House majority. And in California, the House Ethics Committee announced an investigation into Representative Jimmy Gomez over allegations of inappropriate sexual contact with a House staffer. Michael Gold reports that Gomez, 51, acknowledged personal mistakes outside his marriage but denied violating rules against relationships with direct subordinates, calling the interactions consensual. The investigation will examine whether House rules were breached. Gomez represents parts of Los Angeles and has been a rising figure in the Congressional Hispanic Caucus. Business news: by now, pay later loans, once used for retail splurges, are now being pitched for basic needs: electricity, rent, health insurance, even water bills. Stacey Cowley reports that apps like Flex, Zip, and Affirm are partnering with utilities, landlords, and medical providers to offer short-term financing. The rapid growth raises questions: is this consumer preference or financial desperation? With household debt rising and savings depleted, these loans can carry high fees and trap borrowers in cycles. Regulators are watching, but the sector remains lightly supervised. In India, a college boom has left graduates drowning in debt and jobless. Alex Trevelyan and Shokat Nanda visited Knowledge Park 3 near Delhi, where 100,000 students attend private universities that sprang up on the promise of middle-class entry. Families drain savings for degrees that often lead to low-paying or no jobs. The flood of graduates far outstrips the creation of well-paying positions, turning a societal bet on education into a crisis of expectations. The government's push for higher enrollment has not been matched by industrial policy to absorb the workforce. Paramount is asking a federal judge to force the opponents of its $111 billion acquisition of Warner Bros. Discovery to post a $1.88 billion bond to cover delay costs from their antitrust lawsuit. Lauren Hirsch and Benjamin Mullen report that 12 states led by California, plus the Writers Guild of America, sued to block the merger, arguing it would consolidate too much media power. Paramount says the delay could cost millions, and wants the plaintiffs to bear the risk if they lose. The trial's outcome will reshape Hollywood's streaming landscape. Technology: the internet is awash in AI-generated slop, low-quality, synthetic content clogging platforms. Spotify, LinkedIn, and others are deploying detection tools, watermarking, and human moderation to stem the tide. But the volume is staggering. Generative AI can produce text, images, audio, and video at near zero marginal cost. Platforms are caught between openness and quality, and the digital sewage heap is growing faster than filters can adapt. The challenge is not just technical but economic. AI content farms monetize engagement, creating incentives to flood the zone. On the infrastructure side, NVIDIA announced it will back a massive data center in Ohio with up to $105 billion. Callie Huang reports the facility, one of the world's largest, could cost $500 billion total and will be leased by OpenAI. Jensen Huang said NVIDIA will guarantee lease and power payments, noting that AI labs are growing faster than their balance sheets and long-term credit profiles can support. The scale underscores the capital intensity of the AI arms race, where compute is the new oil. New York News: Luigi Mangioni's state murder trial has been delayed as his lawyers seek dismissal. Hirobi Miko reports that Mangione, 28, pleaded guilty last Friday to 2 federal counts of stalking leading to the death of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson in December 2024. The state case, which carries a potential life sentence without parole, is on hold while the defense argues double jeopardy and other grounds. The federal plea allocution detailed the planning and execution of the killing, which shocked the corporate world and sparked a bizarre wave of online fascination. Mayor Zoran Mamdani's administration will skip a city council hearing tomorrow on the rollout of the new tax on high-end second homes, submitting written testimony instead. Mihir Javeri and Sally Goldenberg say a pending lawsuit over the tax's implementation prompted the decision, avoiding a public confrontation. The tax, aimed at Pied Terra owners, has enraged some wealthy New Yorkers and become a political flashpoint for the progressive mayor. But Mamdani also launched a lighter initiative, Parents' Night Out, providing 4 hours of free babysitting to 265 families. Emma Fitzsimmons followed one couple, Stella Tantores and her husband, who enjoyed a rare date at an ice cream shop while their kids were cared for. Parents used the time to reconnect, tackle chores, or simply sleep. The program is part of Mamdani's broader push to make the city more family-friendly, though critics call it a band-aid on the childcare crisis. Arts and culture: actress Hayden Panettiere, 36, known for Heroes in Nashville, was found in cardiac arrest at a Greenville, South Carolina apartment complex on Sunday. Derek Bryson Taylor and Matt Stevens report that a preliminary police investigation found no evidence of foul play. Panettiere's career began at 11 months old in commercials. She starred in over 50 ads by age 5, then soap operas, before her breakout as Claire Bennett in Heroes. Maya Salam has a guide to streaming her best performances, from Remember the Titans to Scream 4. Elizabeth Smart, whose 2002 kidnapping captivated the nation, has launched a podcast, The Survivor Files with Elizabeth Smart. Maya Salam writes that Smart interviews survivors of violent crimes about the lifelong process of healing. The first episode features Kara Robinson Chamberlain, who escaped a serial killer at 15. Smart says she wants to shift the true crime genre from sensationalism to resilience. Books: The Times Summer Reading Quiz offers 32 picks tailored to your mood. And Edwidge Danticat's new novel, Day, follows a Haitian-American mother in Miami who survives a mass shooting but tells no one she was there. Imbalombu's review calls it a portrait of the numbing aftershocks of random violence in 21st century America, a story about the silence that follows trauma. Food: recipe developer and writer shares how she fed her family well on $28 a day. The secret? Rigorous meal planning, sticking to the grocery list, and zero food waste. It's not easy, but it's possible. A masterclass in frugality that doubles as a commentary on food costs. Science: jaguars are reappearing in the Arizona mountains, a lone male roaming, and a female spotted just across the border in Mexico. Douglas Maine and photographer Celia Talbot Tobin report that trail cameras captured the female in Sonora, 2 miles south of the border. The sightings raise hopes for natural recolonization, but the border wall poses a formidable barrier to movement and genetic exchange. Conservationists are pushing for wildlife corridors. And a medical marvel, Nina Nizar, 3 feet 9 inches tall with Jansen's disease, a genetic disorder affecting just 30 people worldwide, has become the first patient in a clinical trial for a treatment. Gina Kolata tells how Nazar's sheer determination drove researchers to launch the study at the NIH. She and her 2 sons have the condition. Her advocacy turned a hopeless diagnosis into a scientific opportunity. Health: more U.S. parents are opting children out of vaccine requirements, the CDC reports. Roughly 4% of kindergartners had non-medical exemptions in the 2025-26 school year, an 18% jump from the prior year, the largest annual increase on record. This comes a week after Trump signed an executive order to scale back childhood shots. Measles and other preventable diseases are spreading, and public health officials warn that herd immunity is eroding. New research on wildfire smoke reveals people are exposed to more toxins than previously known, not just particulate matter but heavy metals, volatile organics, and other hazards that penetrate deep into lungs and bloodstream. The findings come as fire seasons lengthen and smoke events become coast to coast. And welcome to Needle Nation. Weight loss drugs like GLP-1 agonists, peptide therapies, IVF injections, sharps are migrating out of doctors' offices into homes. Even needle phobics are embracing self-injection for the promised benefits. The cultural shift reflects both medical innovation and a DIY health ethos. Travel: Brittany's Emerald Coast in France offers a cool, maritime alternative to Europe's scorching summers, vast beaches, oyster farms, and a rhythm dictated by tides. A refreshing escape for those avoiding the Mediterranean heat. Real estate: in Ellensburg, Washington, a couple built a low-slung home designed for intimate living but scalable for entertaining old friends. Tim McKeough describes how architecture firm Tokel blended the house into alfalfa fields, creating a long-term refuge. Fashion: Martha's Vineyard is booming as a hub of black joy, cultural power, and corporate investment. Netflix, Ruth E. Carter, Lil Flip all part of the August scene. Meanwhile, Knicks center Karl Anthony Towns married influencer Jordan Woods in a star-studded Malibu wedding, capping a summer of NBA nuptials. And for the jeansaverse, Vanessa Friedman offers alternatives: structured trousers, knit pants, technical fabrics, anything but denim. Obituary: Pauline Clayden, the last surviving soloist from the Sadler's Wells Ballet's historic 1949 Sleeping Beauty at the Met, the performance that changed American dance, died at 103. Alastair Macaulay reflects on her legacy and that pivotal night. Magazine: why is it so hard to build a transformer? The linchpin of the power grid can take 5 years to manufacture, creating a bottleneck for everything from renewable integration to AI data centers. The supply chain is fragile, and demand is exploding. Opinion: Michelle Goldberg on the aftermath of scholar Jason Arde's death and mistaken calls for censorship. Kristen Soltis Anderson argues Democrats aren't in Tea Party territory yet. Alina Chan warns that 6 years post-COVID, no one tracks risky virus experiments. David Plouffe analyzes the 2028 Democratic primary calendar shakeup. Sharon Weinberger says Silicon Valley was never pacifist, it just followed the money. Matt Dinnan on teaching by struggling openly with a masterpiece. And Michael Bustamante writes that Cuba is out of time, governments can wait, ordinary Cubans cannot. That's your briefing for this Tuesday, August 18th. Thank you for listening. We'll be back tomorrow with the latest headlines. Have a good day.